Welcome to 10 Minutes a Day, a daily reading of the Catholic Church's social encyclicals. We interrupt the planned progression of the documents to bring you Magnifica Humanitas, the brand new encyclical of Pope Leo XIV on safeguarding the human person in the time of artificial intelligence. In the tragic context of the Second World War, in the years of Reconstruction that followed, the teachings of Pius XII made a significant contribution to the development of social doctrine. This is particularly true of his Christmas radio messages, in which he outlined the framework of an international order based on justice, peace, and the recognition of human dignity. In these messages, the Pope proposed a dialogue with society based on an appeal to natural law, understood as a set of objective principles that precede the interests of individuals and states, and which must regulate both the internal life of nations and their mutual relations. Pius XII also attributed a decisive role to professional associations, labor unions, and the various intermediary organizations in the economic and social order. He recognized these organized forms of society as an essential safeguard for civil equilibrium and for protecting the common good. He affirmed the need for a sound rule of law for guarding against the abuse of power, and he recognized democracy as a means for ensuring the proper exercise of authority. At the same time, he warned against any attempt to base law on utility or force, recalling that an international order, governed by the advantage of the strongest, exposes weaker peoples to oppression and fundamentally undermines trust between nations. Finally, Pius XII identified profound economic imbalances between countries as one of the factors fueling conflicts. Three guidelines remain particularly significant for our own times, currently marked by new forms of global power and growing inequalities: the need for law to take precedence over interests, the awareness that economic disparities are a breeding ground for tension and violence, and the necessity of a network of associations capable of mediating between the individual and the state. These guidelines continue to provide important criteria that enable social doctrine to interpret the dynamics of globalization and promote a more just and peaceful international order. A new phase in the Church's social teaching began with St. John the 23rd, who placed a greater emphasis on the global dimension of social issues and the language of rights. In Mater et Magistra, he presented the Christian faith as a light capable of uniting heaven and earth. He recalled that, while the Church's primary mission is the sanctification and proclamation of eternal goods, she does not neglect the concrete needs of people's daily lives, and is concerned with every authentic human good. Based on this unified vision of humanity, John the 23rd emphasized that societal life recognizes a balance between the initiative of citizens and groups who are called to organize themselves and work together, and the action of the state, which must coordinate and provide support without stifling the freedom and responsibility of individuals. Hence, he drew attention to fair remuneration for work, worker participation, and the growing disparities between countries. A few years later, in Pacem and Terris, John the 23rd addressed for the first time not only the faithful, but also all people of goodwill, organically linking the dignity of the person to the recognition of fundamental rights and duties, and proposing a direction for society, at the international level too, based on truth, justice, love, and freedom. In the present day, which is marked by widespread conflict and new forms of global interdependence, the following aspects of his thought remain particularly significant: the universal perspectives of his appeal, his reference to human rights as a shared framework, and his conviction that lasting peace requires institutions and relations between peoples that are inspired by the dignity of every person. The Second Vatican Council marked a turning point in the Church's understanding of herself in the contemporary world. In the pastoral constitution Gaudium et Spes, The council presented the image of a church that is close to humanity, engaged with the world, and committed to reflecting on the concrete reality of historical situations rather than abstract concepts. The text addresses the major issues of marriage and the family, economic and societal life, the political community, war, and peace. It insists that economic and institutional structures are just only to the extent that they serve the integral development of the person and promote the responsible participation of all. The importance of this conciliar document for the social doctrine of the Church lies not only in having opened up the horizons for thematic reflection, but also in its method of discernment that invites us to interpret historical changes guided by the gospel and human expertise. This approach reveals that dialogue with the world is not a tactical choice for the Church, but a concrete expression of her mission, because the gospel, like leaven, is capable of transforming the structures of society from within and forging paths toward greater humanity. The declaration Dignitatis Humanae can be included in the same context. Here, the Council recognized that religious freedom is a fundamental right grounded in human dignity that must be guaranteed by law so as to prevent people from being forced to act against their conscience or impeded from seeking or professing the truth both privately and publicly. This principle is highly relevant today, continues to provide social doctrine with decisive criteria for protecting individuals and building pluralistic and peaceful societies. During the pontificate of St. Paul VI, an understanding of peace emerged that was not reduced to the mere absence of war, but took shape within the scope of integral human development. In Populorum Progressio, he described development as a transition from less humane to more humane living conditions. He further understood it as a process that concerns each person and the whole person. That is, every dimension of the person and all people without exception. For this reason, Paul VI could affirm that development understood in this way is in reality a new name for peace, because it aims to eradicate the roots of injustice and conflict and create opportunities for a more dignified life for all. The establishment of the Pontifical Commission Justia et Pax should also be seen in this light as an attempt to give stable form to this insight at the ecclesial international levels, while bearing in mind the growing gap between rich and poor countries and the need for policies that genuinely promote more humane living conditions for all. In XXIII Adveniens, written on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of Rerum Novarum, Paul VI applied this perspective to post-industrial society, marked by urbanization, new forms of poverty, and rapid cultural changes that called into question the future of individuals and communities. Paul VI believed that although the gospel was proclaimed, written, and lived out in a historical and cultural context very different from our own, its message was not outdated. Instead, it offers a vision of the human person, relationships, authority, and the common good that is still capable of guiding economic, political, and cultural choices today. In other words, the gospel remains relevant because it provides the criteria for recognizing what humanizes or dehumanizes, and what liberates or oppresses in ever-changing situations. For the social doctrine of the Church, Paul VI's most demanding legacy is precisely this. As long as there are people in the world who are excluded from the development befitting human dignity, the Christian community cannot be content with a theoretical proclamation of peace. Rather, beginning where people are marginalized, it must allow the gospel to pass judgment on those economic and political structures which, as St. John Paul II would later remind us, can become veritable structures of sin. As a result, no person or people will be treated as expendable in the processes of development.